Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're tackling a topic you guys specifically requested. It's lockout tagout procedures for electrical safety.
Yeah, a lot of you out there working with electrical equipment, so we know how important this stuff is.
For sure, and we've got some great sources lined up for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've got
Some OSHA standards, of course.
the NFPA 70E guidelines.
And even a real-life case study.
Yeah, that's going to really bring it home why this matters.
So let's jump right in. I get that lockout tagout is about de-energizing equipment before you work on it.
Right.
But why are there so many rules about this? Like way more than other safety stuff.
You know, that's a great question, and it kind of gets to the heart of why electrical work is treated differently.
Okay.
We need to understand that the stakes are just a lot higher.
Hmm.
To see why, let's go back to 1970 when Congress passed the Occupational Safety and Health Act.
The OSH Act.
Exactly, and they were serious about it, They
Okay.
found that workplace injuries and illnesses were a huge drag on the whole country.
Not just individual workers.
It's not just the workers themselves, but lost productivity wages, medical expenses.
Wow.
It was a burden on interstate commerce.
So it was about protecting workers and the economy.
Exactly, two birds, one stone.
Smart.
Hmm.
But how did lockout tagout come out of that?
Well, the OSH Act basically says that employers have to provide a safe workplace,
Right.
and employees have to follow safety rules.
Makes sense. So it's a shared responsibility.
Right, exactly. And lockout tagout is a big part of making that happen when it comes to electricity.
Okay, but what does that actually look like in practice? What does OSHA want to see?
Well, let's cut through the legal jargon and get to the practical stuff.
Perfect.
OSHA's all about clarity. They require written procedures that everyone can access.
Okay.
And those procedures need to cover every single energy source.
Wait, so not just turning off the power at the breaker?
Nope, that's where a lot of folks get tripped up.
Really?
There's this thing called stored energy.
Oh, right, like in capacitors.
Yeah, capacitors, springs, hydraulic systems, all that can still be live even with the main power
Yeah.
off. OSHA says you've got to identify and deal with all of it before doing any work.
Gotcha. So it's not just flipping a switch.
Nope. You need to understand the whole system.
And what about making sure something is actually de-energized?
Oh, OSHA's very specific about that too.
Okay.
They want a qualified person,
Someone with the right training.
someone with the training and knowledge of that specific equipment to test for energy.
No guessing allowed.
No assumptions allowed.
That's serious.
Uh-huh.
So once everything's de-energized and checked, the work can begin right.
Well, almost.
I mean-
Before you start, you've got to apply those lockout and tagout devices.
Right, to physically prevent the equipment from being energized.
Exactly. It's about creating a barrier that prevents accidents while you're working.
So using a padlock on the breaker switch,
That's the idea. A physical lock is generally preferred over a tagout device.
which relies more on warnings.
More warnings and procedures, yeah.
So the lock really drives home the point that, hey, this is off limits.
Exactly. And speaking of off limits, the next step is verification.
We don't just trust that flipping the switch worked.
Nope, no assumptions, remember? This is where those qualified personnel we talked about come in.
Using their special tools to double check.
They use their special testing equipment to confirm there's no lingering voltage or stored energy.
So no cutting corners on that stuff.
No way.
It's really all about protecting lives.
That's the bottom line.
Speaking of protecting lives,
Yeah.
that case study you mentioned
Yeah.
really highlights why all this matters. It's a reminder that even experienced workers can get hurt.
Absolutely. And this one was about a 48-year-old machine operator.
Okay, and he had been on the job for a while, right?
19 years on the job.
Wow.
And his employer had a written safety program. They held regular safety meetings.
They were trying to do the right thing.
They were, and the machine itself was automated,
Ah.
designed to shut down if any panels were opened.
So they had some safety measures in place.
They did, but here's the thing about lockout, tagout. Sometimes those measures aren't enough.
Especially if procedures aren't followed exactly right.
Oh. Right, in this case, the victim was found inside the machine.
Inside, but it's supposed to shut down automatically.
I know, right. But there was a spot where the guard had to be removed manually.
Okay.
It seems he accessed the machine through that opening, and somehow the shutdown didn't engage.
That's terrifying.
Mm.
So even in a seemingly safe environment, it's crucial to follow that lockout out process.
Absolutely no shortcuts when it comes to electrical safety.
One small mistake and
Then consequences can be devastating.
this isn't just about paperwork.
It's about preventing tragedies.
Okay, so we've talked about OSHA requirements and what can happen if they're not followed.
Right.
But you also mentioned NFPA 70E. How does that fit in?
Oh, yeah. NFPA 70E is like the next level.
Higher.
It's a more comprehensive approach to electrical safety.
So it builds on those essential OSHA requirement.
Exactly. Complying with OSHA is the bare minimum.
Right.
NFPA 70E can really help you create a truly electrically safe work condition.
Okay. I'm intrigued. But before we dive into the details of NFPA 70E,
Yeah.
maybe let's just recap what we've learned so far.
Good idea.
It's a lot to take in.
Absolutely. A recap is a great idea. We've established that OSHA sets the baseline right.
Right. Written procedures, addressing all energy sources, verifying de-energization.
Exactly. But that case study really showed us even seemingly safe environments can be deadly.
If those procedures aren't followed to the letter.
Right. It's a reminder that safety is not just about compliance.
It's about creating a culture of vigilance.
And meticulous attention to detail.
Okay, so now I'm really curious about this NFPA 70E.
Yeah.
You said it's even more specific than OSHA, especially about creating that safe work condition.
It is.
Where do we even begin with that?
Well, Article 120 of NFPA 70E lays out an 8-step process.
8 steps.
Yeah, and I think you'll find it really helpful.
Okay, I'm ready. Toolbox in hand.
Hold on. The first step isn't about grabbing tools.
Okay.
It's about grabbing information.
So before you even touch a wire, you're saying?
Absolutely.
Oh.
You need to understand the scope of the work, the equipment you're using, and every potential energy source.
Like a recon mission before you deploy your trip.
Exactly. You got to scout out the terrain and identify those hazards.
Okay. Step 1 is all about intel.
Right. Gather information, understand the situation.
What's next?
Step 2 is isolation.
Ah, so now I get to flip that breaker switch.
Well, it's a bit more than that. Remember, we're not just dealing with electricity here.
Right.
You need to make sure the equipment is isolated from every possible energy source.
Including those hidden energy sources.
Exactly. Even if the main power is off, a capacitor could still have a charge.
Yeah, and give you a nasty shock.
That's why step 2 is so important. You might need to discharge capacitors or bleed down pressure in hydraulic systems just to be sure.
Okay, so we've identified the hazards, isolated the equipment.
Right.
What's next? Do I get to start working now?
Almost there.
Yeah.
Now comes step 3, applying those lockout and tagout devices.
Right, so now I finally get to slap a padlock on that breaker.
That's it. It's about creating a visual and physical barrier.
To stop anyone from accidentally re-energizing the equipment.
Exactly. Remember, lockout devices like a physical lock are usually preferred over tagout devices.
Which are more like warnings.
More like warnings and signs, yeah.
So the lock really sends the message that this equipment is off limits.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our locks and tags in place. What's next?
Well, now comes step 4, verification.
So we don't just assume that everything worked right.
Absolutely not. This is where those qualified people come in again.
Right, they'll actually test to make sure.
They use their specialized equipment to make sure it's truly de-energized.
No room for error there.
No room for error at all.
This is serious stuff.
Absolutely. It's all about preventing accidents.
Okay, so we've identified the hazards, isolated the equipment, applied our lockout, tagout devices,
Right.
and verified that it's de-energized.
That's right. We're moving right along.
But there's still more, right?
There is. Even though the main power is off, there might be some hidden pockets of energy.
Like what?
Well, think about residual energy hazards. That's what step 5 is all about.
So going after those sneaky energy sources.
Yeah, exactly.
What does that involve?
Well, it depends on the equipment and the type of stored energy. It might be discharging capacitors or bleeding down pressure in pneumatic or hydraulic system.
Okay.
Or maybe blocking moving parts that could release stored energy.
It's like a final sweep to make sure everything is truly safe.
Precisely.
So can I finally start working now?
You got it. Step 6 is where you can roll up your sleeves and get to work on that repair.
Finally. But I can't just forget about safety at this point.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Even though the power is off, you still need to be careful.
Right. Use the right tools, follow the procedure.
Exactly, and be aware of your surroundings.
Just because the energy is isolated doesn't mean there aren't other hazards.
Exactly.
So you've created this safe bubble, but you still need to pay attention.
You got it.
So the work is done. What happens next?
Well, now we start to carefully reverse the process.
Like taking off the locks and tags?
Right. Step 7 is all about preparing for re-energization.
Okay, and how do we do that safely?
Just like with the lockout-tagout process itself, there's a specific sequence.
Okay.
First, make absolutely sure all tools, equipment, and people are clear of the area.
So nobody gets zapped when the power comes back on.
Exactly. It's like a reverse safety sweep.
Okay.
Then double check that all the lockout or tagout devices are still in place.
And that no one's messed with them.
Right. It's about undoing those safety measures very carefully.
So we've prepped the equipment for re-energization. Are we ready for the grand finale?
We are. Step 8 is the moment we've all been waiting for re-energization.
This is where I finally flip that breaker switch back on.
Yes, but even this final step requires attention to detail.
Okay.
First, everyone in the area needs to know what's happening.
No surprises.
Right, communication is key. Then
Ooh.
carefully remove all the lockout or tagout devices,
And the person who put them on should be the one to take them off right.
ideally, or at least be involved in the process.
And make sure everyone is accountable.
Exactly. Once all the locks and tags are off, you can re-energize the equipment.
But we're not done yet, right?
Nope. Okay.
You need to monitor the equipment closely as it comes back online.
To make sure everything is working right.
Right, and be ready to shut it down again if there are any problems.
So vigilance until the very end.
Absolutely, safety is an ongoing process.
Wow, that 8-step process is really detailed.
It is.
It shows how much goes into creating a safe work environment when you're dealing with electricity.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
But it's not a one-size-fits-all checklist either, right?
Right. The specifics will vary depending on the situation.
So adapt it to each job.
But always follow those underlying principles.
Identify and mitigate hazards.
Exactly.
This isn't just about checking boxes
It's about understanding the why behind the rules.
and taking proactive steps to prevent accidents.
You got it.
It's about creating a culture of safety.
Where everyone is engaged and committed.
To protecting themselves and their colleagues. Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored the OSHA standards, seen the consequences of not following them, and now we've delved into NFPA 70E's 8-step process.
That's a lot to cover.
It is, but it's all crucial for anyone working with electrical equipment.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot about the technical stuff,
Right.
but I'm curious about the human side of this.
Okay.
How do we create a workplace where these procedures are not just followed, but truly embraced?
You're talking about building a safety culture.
Exactly. What does that look like in practice?
It's about making safety everyone's responsibility.
Just the safety officer's job.
Right. It starts with leadership.
Okay.
When managers and supervisors show a real commitment to safety, it sends a message.
So it's not just about saying the right words.
It's about actions speaking louder.
Okay, so walk the walk.
Exactly. Employees can tell when safety is a priority and when it's just lip service.
So lead by example.
Absolutely. But we also need to create an environment where people feel safe speaking up.
What do we mean?
Sometimes employees might hesitate to report safety concerns.
Right, they might be worried about getting in trouble.
Exactly. So you need open and transparent communication.
How do we do that?
Make sure there are clear channels for communication.
Like safety committees or suggestion boxes.
Exactly. Or regular safety meetings where everyone can participate.
So people can speak up without fear.
And know that their concerns will be taken seriously.
That makes sense. And it's not just top-down communication either, right?
Right. You want to encourage peer-to-peer communication too.
Like coworkers reminding each other about safety procedures.
Exactly. Or looking out for each other's well-being.
So safety becomes a team effort.
Exactly.
What about training? How important is that?
Oh, training is essential.
Okay.
It gives people the knowledge and skills to work safely.
But it can't just be a one-time thing, right?
No, it needs to be ongoing, engaging, and relevant to the specific work they're doing.
Especially with lockout, tagout, with all those details.
You're right. Regular refreshers, toolbox talks, even just informal discussions can help.
Keep those steps fresh in everyone's minds,
Exactly. And don't forget about hands-on training.
where people can actually practice the procedures.
Exactly. It's like anything else. The more you practice, the better you get.
Okay, so we've talked about leadership, communication, and training.
Right.
Is there anything else that contributes to a strong safety culture?
One thing that's often overlooked is recognition.
Recognizing safe behaviors.
Exactly.
How do we do that?
It could be something as simple as a thank you
Okay.
or acknowledging someone at a meeting. Maybe even a small gift.
It shows you appreciate their effort.
Exactly. And when you acknowledge safe behavior, you encourage more of it.
That makes sense. And what about when someone does something unsafe,
You need to address that promptly and fairly.
but not in a punitive way?
Right. It's about turning those moments into learning opportunities.
So people understand the consequences of their actions.
Exactly.
That creates a more accountable workplace.
And a safer one.
So it's all about continuous learning and improvement.
You got it.
And striving to be better every day.
That's the goal.
It sounds like building a strong safety culture is an ongoing journey.
It is, but it's worth it.
What are the benefits?
Well, when people feel safe, they're more likely to be engaged and productive. You'll see fewer accidents, higher morale, a better work environment overall.
It's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
This has been really insightful. We've explored a lot,
We have.
from the legal stuff to the human element.
It's all connected.
I think our listener is walking away with a much deeper understanding of lockout tagout.
I hope so.
Not just the what, but the why and the how.
That's what empowers people to champion safety.
Okay, before we wrap things up, one final thought.
Sure.
We've talked a lot about following procedures. But what happens when something unexpected comes up?
You mean like an emergency situation?
Yeah, what if there's an emergency and we need to act fast, even if it means breaking the rules?
That's a great question, and it brings up a really important point. Sometimes strict adherence to the rules can actually hinder our ability to respond in an emergency.
So you're saying there are times when you might need to deviate from this standard procedure?
Think of it like this. The rules give us a framework,
Okay.
but they can't account for every possible scenario.
So you need to be able to think on your feet.
Exactly. That's where judgment, experience, and a deep understanding of the system come in.
Okay.
You need to assess the situation, weigh the risks, and make the best decision you can.
Even under pressure.
Even under pressure, that's right.
That's a lot to handle. How do we prepare people for that?
It starts with thorough training.
Not just memorizing steps.
Right, it's about understanding the principles of electrical safety,
Okay.
recognizing hazards, developing critical thinking skills.
So they can adapt to unexpected situations.
Exactly. Simulations and scenario-based training can really help with that.
So we're not just training people to follow rules.
We're training them to be problem solvers.
To think critically and respond appropriately in those critical moments.
That's the goal.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about lockout tagout.
It's been a thorough deep dive.
We've explored the regulations, the procedures, the human factors, and even those rare emergency situations.
It's all important.
Thank you for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
I hope our listener feels well equipped to champion safety in their own workplace
I hope so too.
and to help create a culture where everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
That's what it's all about.
Well said. Remember, folks, safety is a journey, not a destination.
That's right.
There's always more to learn, new challenges to address, and opportunities to improve.
Absolutely.
Safety is a continuous process.
Of learning, adapting, and striving to be better every day.
Great point. Well, thanks again for joining us on this deep dive into electrical safety.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.